6 days of Tony continues here on the Big 550 KTRS. Tony Messenger, Metro columnist for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, filling in for McGraw Millhaven, who's on vacation. And you all remember last week the big story about the child that got into the zoo in Cincinnati, and authorities there had to kill the gorilla to protect the child, which I personally don't think there's any other option. It's sad. We don't like the gorilla to be dead, but hey, if you can't find a way to keep the kid out of the gorilla cage and the kid gets in the gorilla cage, I'm sorry, you're going to have to shoot the gorilla. Anyway, Ryan Burrow, ABC News correspondent, is here to join us. Apparently, there will be no charges against the parents who let the child get into the zoo enclosure. Ryan, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, not only no charges against the parents, no charges against the zoo. The Hamilton County prosecutor saying that they did 4 interviews at the zoo. They went 4 separate times. They interviewed witnesses several different times as well, and they said it just did not rise to the level of any kind of criminal action, whether it be by the zoo for not properly barricading the enclosure, or whether it came to the parents with potential for neglect of letting that 3-year-old get into the enclosure. Essentially, their investigation found that the zoo was as safe as it could be. They've obviously made some changes since to secure that one soft point where the boy entered the enclosure, but the prosecutor's saying that their heart goes out because they had to kill the gorilla. On the other hand, with the mother, they said that she was attending another child, turned away for just a second or two, and that in that moment, that's when the boy entered. And some pretty compelling arguments from the prosecutor as to why they did not choose to charge.
Ryan, do you know what sort of changes the zoo has made?
Specifically, the area, apparently that soft point has been secured. I'm not exactly sure what that means, whether an additional line of fence or gate or some kind of protective barrier has been added, but they wanted to make sure that the exact thing that happened with that boy did not happen again. But I can tell you that in 38 years, this is the first time this has ever happened. They said that the enclosure far exceeded the barrier standards among zoos. In fact, it had just previously passed an inspection, so they really didn't, before this situation happened, have any concerns about the safety of that enclosure.
Ryan, one of the things that often happens in similar circumstances, to the extent anything is similar to this, is when criminal charges aren't filed, often the civil cases end up being filed after that. Is there talk in Cincinnati of lawsuits either against the zoo or the family on behalf of the child, or any of that?
It appears as though the family was ready for this to be over with. I don't necessarily know that, and granted, we're at this moment in time. We'll see it 6 months from now if maybe they, reach out to a lawyer and say, wait a minute, this wasn't right. But they released a statement saying they were pleased with the decision. It's what they expected, and saying that this is one more step in putting this tragic episode behind us. Now, we know the outcry from animal rights groups, PETA for one, as far as how the zoo handled the situation, whether or not they have any, ability to go after the zoo, which I'm sure that they would be doing either way. I mean, they're not a big fan of zoos in the first place. We'll have to see. Not quite sure of any legal action taken by any animal rights groups yet as to the against the zoo or as to the shooting of the gorilla.
Is the zoo back to normal operation? Everything same as normal in Cincinnati?
It is. In fact, they've been working on expanding that gorilla enclosure. It's a $12 million project that's set to be completed next year. They've reopened it. They reopened it just a few days after the incident. So, they're trying to move on. Obviously, down one gorilla, but they're hoping to kind of move on to this next level and this next chapter of their gorilla enclosure.
Ryan Burrow, ABC.